everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sportsbook Confidential. My name is John Sullivan, and I'm coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. And this little show here is to help you learn and grow as a sports bettor. And we're in the dog days of August, and we're making that transition from baseball to full-time football, my favorite time of the year. So today we're going to continue our NFL previews with the AFC South. Talk about that division, and I'm going to spend this week and the next 2 weeks talking about fantasy positions. If you have a fantasy football draft coming up, and we'll give you a little advice there. And, of course, my favorite summertime football, the CFL. We got Week 10 today, halfway through the season. Got 3 games left this week, and we'll talk about those as we go along. But before we do any of that, we're going to start by updating my bankroll. And we've continued our slide, although a smaller slide this week, but we had some really tough baseball losses as we've closed out our baseball betting for a while at least. Maybe during the playoffs we'll get back into it, but we had Trevor Bauer and the Reds on the money line, and that was a winner for us, plus $20 to the bankroll. And then we had the Nationals gave up 4 runs in the bottom of the 9th to the Mets to lose that game. That was very frustrating. And the Giants did the exact same thing, except the 7th inning, they gave up 4 runs to lose by a couple. And we had the Eskimos Red Blacks over, and that was a very defensive-minded game, so that wasn't even close. And then we had the BC Lions plus 10.5. Kind of glad I didn't bet them on the money line because they ended up losing by a point. Had a real bad turnover late in the game, and they lost 35-34. But our bet still won for us. If you do the math, that's a loss of $20 on the week, and it brings our new bankroll to $581. Dividing by 30, as we always do, because we're selective sports bettors, we're going to change our bet size this week to $19 going forward. So another tough week, but I'm hoping that football treats us a lot better now that we're done with baseball. That's frustrating variance, but that's the way it goes sometimes. So moving on to our NFL preview, for those of you that don't really follow the divisions of the NFL, today we're talking about the AFC South, of course, the Indianapolis Colts, the Houston Texans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Tennessee Titans make up this division. And surprisingly, the way it is, the odds are listed, you don't really know who the favorite is. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute, but we're going to start with the Indianapolis Colts. And of these 4 teams, the Colts are far and away the sportsbook favorite of these 4 teams to, win the AFC or win the Super Bowl. However, due to the recent announcement of the injury to Andrew Luck, their season win total is off the board right now. I think it was 10 or 10.5, and that's taken off the board because they don't know how serious Andrew Luck's injury will be. And, of course, that would be a huge dent to their championship hopes this year. But you can still bet on them to win the division at plus 110. Again, that's, if you believe that's good value, if you think they have an easy chance this year to win the division. But like I always say, you have to let the sportsbook hold on to your money for 17 weeks. So is it worth it to win 1 unit? To win the AFC, they're basically 5-1 plus 498. And to win the Super Bowl, it's less than 11-1, 1071. And the Colts on paper look pretty good at running back. They look good at tight end. They look good at wide receiver. They look actually pretty good on defense. What the 2 areas that concern me, obviously, is the quarterback depth. You've got Jacoby Brissett as the number 2 guy and Chad Kelly on the depth chart, but he's suspended for, I don't know, half a season. I'm not sure what the deal is with him. So if Andrew Luck is out, Jacoby Brissett he's a replacement level player in the NFL. He could lead a team. He did have the Colts for a whole season. he could lead them to a 500 record, maybe a 10-6 record, depending on how things go. But I don't think that they're a championship caliber team with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. So quarterback depth is an issue for me. If it turns out Luck is out for this season, I would think that they would go after somebody. I don't know. I mean, they have the rest of the team in place. The other issue is the kicking. Adam Vinatieri, who is, I think, 47 now, 46 or 47, had spent more than half of his life kicking in the NFL. He was not very accurate last year, and you wonder if he has the depth. He does kick indoors. I think like from 40 yards and in, he's still a quality kicker, but if your game is coming down to kicking a 53-yarder, he is not the guy that I want out there. He obviously has made big kicks, and the pressure will not get to him. But again, do you want a 47-year-old kicker trying to get you to the Super Bowl or get you to win the Super Bowl? I remember Gary Anderson missing that kick for the Vikings when they were 15-1 and headed to the Super Bowl, and he missed that kick, and the Falcons went instead. So hopefully they get a good backup. We'll see what happens with the Colts, but a lot of uncertainty there right now. So let's move on to the Houston Texans, considered to be the second favorites. The over-under 8.5 wins. You would think that the Colts would have 10 or 11 wins in that scenario. But when you see what happens with the other teams, it seems like they're all pretty even. To win the AFC South, plus 230. To win the AFC overall, 19-1. And to win the Super Bowl, 39, just under 40-1. And the Houston Texans, you have a couple issues. Quarterback depth. I don't think they really have a tight end threat, but they have three very good receivers with Fuller, Hopkins, and Cutie. They have two running backs that are very serviceable. And but you get to Deshaun Watson, who has had a significant injury before, and you worry about him maintaining a full season. So we'll see how it goes this year. But they're going to have to rely on him heavily to make a playoff run. Otherwise, they probably are an 8-8 team. On the defensive side of the ball, apparently Jadeveon Clowney wants to be traded, and there's a high likelihood that he will be traded before the season starts. And that leaves them with some there's also a small amount of safeties on the team. I feel like they have depth issues in the secondary and depth issues with their outside defensive line play. So, and the third issue for me is actually the coaching. Bill O'Brien, I don't think, is a very good in-game decision maker. I hope he hires somebody to do that for him. It would improve their win expectation tremendously. I don't follow the team closely enough to know if there's any changes to that scenario, but if he hired a really good in-game decision maker, that would make the over in play for me for sure. So let's move on to the third team, and the team that's the biggest question mark to me is the Jaguars. Season win total over under 8. To win the AFC South, you're looking at about 400-1. To win the AFC, 23-1. To win the Super Bowl for just under 45-1. And so what's happened here is Jacksonville divorced Blake Bortles. I almost forgot his name. But they've kept their receiving core and their running back core intact. TJ Yeldon, I believe, he was with the Bills last year, but I don't know where he is now. But they still have Leonard Fournette at running back. But they have now Nick Foles as the quarterback. And the question is, was the problem last year, was it Bortles or was it the receivers? What will happen is when you have Nick Foles in there now with the same receivers, you have, Tom Coughlin is kind of like the general manager-ish position. This is a very strange scenario in Jacksonville. And then you have Doug Marrone is the unofficial head coach, I guess. I don't know. Like the head coach apprentice or something. They all have very weird titles there. But they made these changes. And the defense had 2 years ago, they were one quarter away from the Super Bowl playing New England. And their defense was a shutdown defense. And last year it was not. Especially the secondary. Gave up a lot of big plays. And they haven't made a whole lot of changes in the last 2 years in that defense. So I wonder if, this team is going – their team is going to have to improve offensively a lot to be competitive, because I still think that this team is going to end up giving a lot of points away. So the secondary, they have one player maybe suspended or injured in their starting secondary. So Jalen Ramsey, of course, is their stud in the secondary, but he had a really good year 2 years ago, and then it's been kind of quiet ever since. So Jacksonville, a huge question mark to me. I would lean under on their play. And then finally, interestingly enough, we have the Tennessee Titans, and their season win total is over under 8. So all of the teams in the AFC South have their win totals at 8 or higher, which seems almost impossible to accomplish. They only play 6 division games, but that means all 4 of these teams would have to excel outside the division to get 8 wins. Mathematically possible, but highly unlikely. To win at the AFC South, plus 675, about 7-1. To win the AFC, 33-1. To win the Super Bowl, 66 plus to 1. I read this morning that the Tennessee Titans are the team with the most exposure to the Las Vegas books on the Super Bowl, which does not mean the most money has been bet on them, but if they were to win the Super Bowl, that it would be the biggest payout possible of all the teams at the moment for the sports books. So it's the team that has the most exposure. Now, whether they're a legit Super Bowl contender or not is up for discussion here. You've got Marcus Mariota, and Tannehill is the backup this year. So if Mariota does get hurt this year, I feel like, Tannehill is better than replacement level quarterback. And they have decent wide receivers and a very good tight end. And there's some injuries on the middle interior defensive line. So the run defense, I feel like, is a big issue for this team. However, the biggest issue for me is the running game. It's not going to be good for Mariota if the running game does not get back to a point of strength, because Derrick Henry is injured, been in a walking boot, and Deion Lewis, who's more of a scat back, Darren Sproles type of player, is good at catching passes, but he's very fumble prone. And if he's the starting running back, that's bad news for the Titans offense, and I would definitely go under on the win total if Derrick Henry is out for a significant period of time. This team would have to become a pass-first team. I don't think they're built that way, and they should. If Derrick Henry's out for a significant part of the year, they should have to go after another running back. I know the Bills have several. They're trying to get rid of Shady McCoy, so we'll see what happens there, but definitely a long shot. But any one of these teams, every single team in this division is relying on quarterback health. Obviously, Andrew Luck is the most important piece to Deshaun Watson, the second most important piece. Nick Foles, not so much for the Jaguars. Mariota, not so much for the Titans. But the team that stays the healthiest is the one that's going to win the division. So they're all kind of up for grabs. If you feel like one of these teams is stronger than the other, you might get very good odds. So check your local sports book and see how that all pans out. So that is it for the AFC South, but we're going to keep talking NFL football because we are going to talk about fantasy quarterbacks. And I had a little page typed up here that I misclicked and I didn't save it. But the fantasy quarterbacks, there's 3 issues that I want to talk about. If you're into your season-long fantasy draft and you've got one coming up and you're like, well, when do I take my quarterback? And when do I take my running back or whatever other, or do I just draft the best player available? Or do I handcuff my running backs and my wide receivers, make sure they're from the same team? You have all these questions. Well, today we're going to talk about quarterbacks, And quarterbacks are not considered to be very often high-level picks. I know that most of the public fantasy rankings have the running backs at the very top, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. And there are some quarterbacks, a few quarterbacks that I consider to be early round quarterbacks. If they are available in the top 3 rounds, you would probably consider taking them depending on, what's available and how you're constructing your team. How many people are in your, there's lots of factors. How many people are in your league? How big are the rosters? What the scoring is very important. If quarterback rushing yards or rushing touchdowns get extra points, that's a factor in which quarterbacks you're going to take. There's lots of what a passing touchdown is worth. You need to look at those little details to determine and target your best. So basically what you're going to want to know is a quarterback overvalued or undervalued? If a quarterback's undervalued, he might be a middle round quarterback that you can get late. If a quarterback's overvalued, somebody's going to take him early, but if you wanted to take him, you would probably take him in the 6th or 7th round, and he'd probably be long gone by then anyway. And then you just don't worry yourself about it. You build around another quarterback or two. So, and also need to know your bye weeks for the quarterbacks, which weeks they're off and not playing. If you're playing in a season-long league, you don't want to give yourself an automatic loss for playing a quarterback that's not earning any points. So what I want to do is I want to go and talk about the early round quarterbacks first, and let's pop those on the screen. And these are the quarterbacks that I would consider saying, our first, in my opinion, first 4 round quarterbacks, depending whether you're doing a 10 or 12 round draft. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is the number 1 guy. I do not think he's going to have a year as great as he had last year. He's more likely to regress towards the mean. Doesn't mean he's not going to have a very good year. I would not spend a number 1 pick on the guy, meaning number 1 overall. If I had the last pick in the first round, maybe. Definitely 2nd or 3rd round for him. Rodgers, if you believe he's going to stay healthy, which means if you believe he's going to stay healthy, you believe that his offensive line has improved, and number 2, his running back is going to stay healthy to keep that running game going and keep the pressure off him. So if you believe all those things, then Aaron Rodgers, with the new coach that's going to do things the way Aaron Rodgers wants, he's motivated to play this year. Matt Ryan in Atlanta. Julio Jones says he wants to go for the receiving record this year. Matt Ryan obviously is going to be the one to throw him the ball. Matt Ryan takes hits very well, but Julio Jones has been injured almost every year that he's played. And if he gets hurt this year, that's kind of a risky pick. So he's a 3rd or 4th round guy for me. Andrew Luck in Indianapolis. We talked about him earlier. If he is ready to start the season, I would take him maybe in the 3rd or 4th round. He is set to have a big year. I feel like his offensive line can protect him. I would be very nervous every time I see him scramble because it's those legs that worry me, those knees, not so much the arm of Andrew Luck. So another risky pick in my opinion. And Drew Brees, I feel a lot of people have him ranked much lower this year. I feel like that the system is so good for him there that he can put up good numbers. That's a guy that I feel like you can get in the third or fourth round easily without having to sweat. He plays in a dome. He plays against other teams that do not have great defenses, in my opinion, that division. I think Tampa Bay is probably going to be the toughest defense he faces in that division. So he's very undervalued this year, I think, and you may be able to get him in the middle rounds, but I think he qualifies as an early round quarterback. So let's go on to the middle rounds, and this would be 4, 5, and 6, in a 10-round draft, or 5, 6, 7, 8 in a 12-round draft. You've got a lot of quarterbacks here. Deshaun Watson is ranked very high in quarterbacks. I personally would not pick him before the middle rounds. He does have a rushing angle to his game. He can vulture touchdowns for you. I have a feeling that he'll be long gone in your draft before the middle rounds. But if he's there, that's when I would take him. Same with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield, again, is a quarterback that, if your fantasy league gets points for wins by the quarterback, then yeah, Baker Mayfield, because he hates to lose. But it's not a pick for pure stats, because there's going to be a lot of spread of the ball there. And, they have a good running game. I don't know how many passing touchdowns he's going to get. Cam Newton in Carolina, if he stays healthy, I always think he's more of a head case than anything else. He does have good receivers. DJ Moore is a sneaky good receiver. Greg Olsen stays healthy. That's good for his game. And he can always run. He doesn't like to run as much as he used to. But he's going to throw a lot of balls to McCaffrey and let McCaffrey do the work. Carson Wentz in Philadelphia, assuming he's healthy again. They have a good offensive system. I feel like he's a middle-of-the-road quarterback, and they have a middle-of-the-road stats. I don't think he's going to put up insane 40 touchdown passes or anything like that, but it's a solid quarterback pick in the 6th or 7th round. Lamar Jackson is another quarterback that I think is undervalued. He's a borderline top early quarterback to me. His rushing component is so undervalued. How many points that's going to bring to your fantasy team. His passing game gets better as time goes on. Obviously, they let Joe Flacco go. I'm a big believer in Lamar Jackson. Phillip Rivers will put up good numbers in L.A. He will have decent, again, his receivers have to stay healthy. If Melvin Gordon does not play, more passing yards for Phillip Rivers, because he's going to be passing to Eckler, who will probably be the starting running back. And that's his standard operating procedure for them. He would be a very good pick in that 5th round. Jared Goff, I feel, is also very undervalued. I feel like you could get him in the 6th or 7th. They have very good receivers in L.A., and most people don't think they can get back to the Super Bowl, but I do. I think they can. And then Mitch Trubisky in Chicago had a great year last year, another quarterback that can run. He's got a great back in Tariq Cohen and 3 solid receivers, a tight end that are all quality. He could lose one of those guys and still have a good year throwing the ball. And then we have going into late round quarterbacks. I'm going to try to wrap this up so we don't have too much overage here. But Russell Wilson in Seattle, not a lot of question marks at receiver, so a lot of rushing on that team. Kyler Murray's going to throw the ball a lot. Don't know what type of production we're going to get out of him. It's very risky to me to take him. But if you can get him in the last 4 rounds. Jameis Winston, with a new coach that believes in him, could be a very undervalued pick. Dak Prescott, is he going to hold out? I don't know. I think he's going to play this year, and then he's going to hold out if he doesn't get a new contract. I don't know. Without Zeke, it's a different ball game for Dak Prescott. Ben Roethlisberger is due for regression. He's got Juju and Vance McDonald and not much else as far as who to throw to. So I worry about Ben. Jimmy Garoppolo, if he stays healthy, very undervalued pick. Kittle, obviously the tight end, is going to catch a ton of balls. I'm very high on Jimmy G, assuming he can keep his leg healthy. Josh Allen, another quarterback with a rushing component. He can take a hit. He's a big guy. He's a better passer than Lamar Jackson, almost as good a runner. I feel like he's super undervalued. If you can get him, in the 7th round, I'd take him. Kirk Cousins is due for a bounce-back year. He had a horrible year last year. And Tom Brady, that team is going more and more rushing. Tom Brady will have a good stats, but he's not worth picking early. Let somebody else pick him. And then finally, we have the last-round quarterbacks. Sam Darnold is very underrated. I think he's a mid to late round. Matthew Stafford, again, has potential to have a good year, but tough situation for him. Derek Carr, who knows what they're going to get with Antonio Brown. Andy Dalton's going to have a tough year. Nick Foles, if he doesn't have rapport with those receivers, it's going to be a long year for Nick Foles. Joe Flacco, same deal. Marcus Mariota, without a running game, there's actually going to be a lot of throwing, but it's always been a question mark of how good of a passer he really is. And then Eli Manning and the New York Giants, what are you going to say about that? Maybe the new quarterback, Daniel Jones comes in and lights the fire there, so we'll see. Anybody else not mentioned is bottom of the barrel. Take them in the very last round if you think they're worth keeping on your roster. So that's going to do it for fantasy football. We're going to quickly cover the CFL. We've got 3 games left in Week 10. There's a 20-week season. Tonight we have the Eskimos at the Argonauts. Argonauts +8. 51 is the total. Argos coming off a win over the Bombers. Going to be sold out at home. I feel like the Argos are competitive. The Eskimos have come back to earth a little bit. Trevor Harris has had a few picks. I feel like +8 is lean Argonauts here. It was 8.5 earlier in the week. Don't know about that total, but Toronto's getting better. Saturday, we have the Tiger Cats at the Red Blacks, a big East Division matchup. Red Blacks +2.5 dogs at home. 48 is the total. I am not sold on the Tiger Cats being the dominant team in the East that everybody thinks they are because of the quarterback play of Dane Evans. But I do like the over here, over 48. I've been burned on the overs this year. But I feel like both of these teams have their complement of receivers available, and it will not be a rush-heavy game. And then Saturday night, Alouettes at the Stampeders, -6.5, 51. Both of these teams have good running games. Both of these teams have average replacement level quarterbacks, and they both have very good defenses, so I like the under all day here. It could become a laugher. The Alouettes will try to keep it a ground control game and try to keep it low scoring for sure. So under for me. I know some people bet the Alouettes at +7, but I like the under. So for my picks this week, you get a CFL trifecta. Friday night, I'm taking the Argonauts +8, -107. On Saturday, the Ticats and the Red Blacks over, and over 48, -108. And then the Alouettes and the Stampeders under 51, -108. So we'll try to get a winning week. Next week, we're going to have college football picks, more NFL preview, and more fantasy preview for you. So I'm going to play the outro music, and I want to thank you all for tuning in and get some winners. Thanks, everybody. Take care.